A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Of his fourth way to hinder peace, by spiritual distresses. 1. The nature of these distresses, the ingredients and degrees of them. Whether all distresses of soul arise from melancholy. 2. Satan's method in working them, the occasions he makes use of, the arguments he urgeth, the strengthening of them by fears. 3. Their weight and burden explained in several particulars. Some concluding cautions. Chapter 9, Part 10. If their lamentations were turned into roarings, and those roarings were like the breaking in of a flood, and that flood of so long continuance that it dried up the marrow of the bones, we may safely imagine, that they were not so much at leisure to order their words, but that their tongues might speak in that dialect, which is proper to astonishment and distress. 5. Though the mind be the principal seat of these troubles, yet the body cannot be exempted from a co-partnership in these sorrows. Notwithstanding, this is so far from abating the trouble, that it increaseth it by a circulation. The pains of the body, contracted by the trouble of the mind, are communicated again to the fountain from whence they came, and reciprocally augment the disquiet of the mind. The body is weakened, their strength poured out like water. They are withered like grass, pined as a skin, become as a bottle in the smoke. Thus David frequently complains, Psalm 22:14, he describes himself as reduced to a skeleton, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint, my heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue cleaveth to my jaws. And thou hast brought me to the dust of death. Neither is this his peculiar case, but the common effect of spiritual distresses, Psalm 39:11. When thou with rebukes dost correct man for iniquity, thou makest his beauty to consume away like a moth. 6. Being thus distressed for their souls, they cast off all care of their bodies, estates, families, and all their outward concerns whatsoever. And no wonder, for being persuaded that they have made shipwreck of their souls, they judge the rest are not worth the saving. 7. Giving all for lost, they usually cast about for some ease to their minds, by seeking after the lower degrees of misery. Hearing or supposing that all are not tormented alike, they endeavor to persuade themselves of a cooler hell. This, if they could reach it, were but poor comfort, and little to their satisfaction. But, as poor as it is usually denied to them, for while they judge themselves to be the greatest sinners, they cannot but adjudge themselves to the greatest torments. And these endeavors being frustrated, they return back to themselves, as now hopeless of the least case, worse than before. Now they fix themselves upon the deep contemplations of their misery. Oh, think they, how great had our happiness been if we had been made toads, serpents, worms, or anything but men. For then should we never have known this unhappiness. And this begets 1,000 vain wishes. Oh, that we had never been born! Or that death could annihilate us! Or that as soon as we had been born, we had died. As Job speaks, chapter 3:11, 12, Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? For then had we not contracted so much guilt. Or that the mountains and hills could fall upon us, and cover us from the face of our judge, Revelation 6:16. 8. When all their hopes are thus dashed, and, like a shipwrecked man on a plank, they are still knocked down with new waves, all their endeavors being still frustrated, they seem to themselves to be able to hold out no longer. Then they give over all further inquiries, and the use of means, they refuse to pray, read, hear. They perceive, as Spear said, that they pray to their own condemnation, and that all is to no purpose. They are weary of their groanings, Psalm 6:6. Their eyes fail with looking up. Their knees are feeble, their hands hang down, and as Haman, Psalm 88:4-5, they count themselves with those that go down to the pit, free among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, whom God remembereth no more. Thus they lie down under their burden, and while they find it so hard to be borne, it is usual for them to come to the utmost point of desperateness, Satan suggesting and forwarding them. Sometimes, they open their mouths with complaints against God, and blaspheme. And, as the last part of the tragedy, being weary of themselves, they seek to put an end to their present misery, by putting an end to their lives. I have presented you with Satan's stratagems against the peace of God's children. The remedies against these and other subtleties, of our grand enemy I shall not offer you, because many others have done that already, to whose writings I must refer you. Some principal directions I have pointed it in the way, and in the general, have done this for the help of the tempted, that I have endeavored to show them the methods of the tempter, which is no small help to preserve men from being thus imposed upon, and to recover out of his snare, those that are. It is a great preservative from sickness, and no mean advantage to the cure, to have a discovery of the disease, and the causes of it. I shall conclude these discoveries with a caution or two. 1. Let none think worse of the serious practice of holy strictness in religion, because these spiritual distresses do sometimes befall those that are conscientiously careful in the ways of God, while the profane and negligent professors are strangers to such trials. These troubles are indeed very sad, but a senseless, careless state is far worse. These troubles often end very comfortably, whereas the other end, except God make them sensible, by conviction of their sin and danger, in that real misery, the fears whereof occasion these sorrows, to God's children. And the danger of spiritual troubles, is not so great as is that of a hardened heart. Nay, God frequently makes use of them to prevent eternal ruin, for one that goes roaring to the pit, there are thousands that go laughing to hell. 2. Let none slight or scoff at these tremendous judgments. It is too common with men, either to ascribe spiritual troubles to melancholy, as if none were ever thus concerned, but such, as by too much seriousness in religion, are become mad, a fair pretense for carelessness, or to a whining dissimulation. To the former I have said something before, and as for the latter I shall only reply, in the words of Spira, to one that objected hypocrisy to him. I am a castaway, a vessel of wrath. Yet dare you call it dissembling and frenzy, and can mock at the formidable example of the heavy wrath of God that should teach you fear and terror. But it is natural to the flesh to speak, either out of malice or ignorance, perversely of the work of God. 3. Let none be afraid of this Goliath, let no man's heart faint because of him. A fear of caution and diligence to avoid his snares is a necessary duty. Be sober, be vigilant. Because your adversary the devil, etc. 1 Peter 5, 8. But a discouraging, distrustful fear is a dishonorable reflection upon God's power and promises to help us, and upon the captain of our salvation, who goeth out before us. Let us hold on in the practice of holiness, and not be afraid. The God of peace shall tread down Satan under our feet shortly. Romans 16:20. Amen. Thanks.